Yo, it's Real Sankara Hours. Real Sankara Hours. Another, this is not a bonus episode, this is a free
No.
episode. So, follow us at Sankara Hours on Twitter. It's a lot of stuff happening, from the Joe Biden, you ain't black comment, and then,
It's
another episode of a Karen being a Karen, and, another police shooting and protests in Minneapolis. So
just another week in America, you guys.
yeah, it's just white America just being white America again. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking
This
about.
is what happens when they don't have sports.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking about. Follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours for bonus content. Where we do fun stuff, theory readings, bonus interviews, stuff of that nature. Yeah, and our RSS feed is on Podbean, realsankarahours.podbean.com. We're on Spotify. iTunes is kind of funky, so so far we're just on Spotify. So yeah, those of us here who are listening on Spotify, thank you. And if you want bonus content, $5 a month at patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours. This is Adam Hudson. Follow me at AdamHudson5 on Twitter.
And this is Peter MGunn. Follow me at MGunnPeter, though I don't know why anyone would want to be on Twitter right now.
Yeah, there's I think it's been a while because we recorded a bonus episode. And it's been a while since we did a free episode, and a lot has happened. So there was the Joe Biden interview with Charlemagne the God on the Breakfast Club, and basically Charlemagne was basically like, I mean, a lot of his questions, I think, to be fair, because Charlemagne, like, he made his career just being an asshole and kind of a troll, and problematic, but I respect him for actually asking serious questions of Joe Biden.
Yeah, he'll ask real questions when he gets like real politicians on, but they always embarrass themselves.
Yeah, which I think, I don't know if it's the politicians themselves or if it's Charlemagne's skills as an interviewer.
It's both, and it's also like, this is when the white patrician elite or Kamala Harris have to like descend into the common Negro folk and provide some semblance of a convincing performance, and of course it's impossible. So they always end up saying something ridiculous, like the infamous Hillary Clinton's hot sauce in her bag, or
and Kamala basically saying that
listening to Tupac in 1989, which
right. And for those of us, by the way, we did an episode on Tupac, and if you pay attention to the episode in 1989, that was 2 years before he released his first album. So
no, well, what it was really was that Kamala Harris was like deep into the tape trading scene in San Francisco, right. So she had gotten the like some digital underground like bootlegs where Tupac was like rapping during a concert. It was actually, that's what that was all about.
Yeah.
But you people wouldn't listen.
Right. And so the latest one he did with Joe Biden, which I thought, like, overall the way he framed his interview was good, because he's basically like, hey, look, a lot of black voters, and mostly older black voters, you can, like, they kind of helped his campaign, like, in terms of momentum, right? And so he's like, okay, like, black voters kind of helped you out, so it's time for some real demands. Like, what are you going to do for black people? Like, what are you going to offer us? Like, we can't just vote for you and get nothing in return. And then Joe Biden was like,
actually, yes, you can, and you're going to.
And also, like, Joe Biden, like, well, first of all, he said he was endorsed by the NAACP, which is actually a lie. He was endorsed, I think, by... There is like an official within the NAACP, but as someone, I've been in the NAACP before, and their policy is the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization, so as an organization, they don't endorse candidates. But people within the NAACP can endorse people individually, but not on behalf of the organization. So when he said that he had an endorsement from the NAACP, that was false. And even the NAACP came out and said, like, actually, no, we did not endorse him. Someone else in the organization did, but they were not speaking on behalf of the NAACP as a whole. So that was a lie, which is very common to Joe Biden, which is to lie a lot.
Well, yeah, what you're missing is that he got the endorsement when he was in South Africa being arrested,
right,
trying to see Nelson Mandela. While he was in jail, some of the NAACP people were also there, and they were so impressed by his dedication to the Black freedom struggle that they gave him a lifetime endorsement. So yeah. Joe Biden is always endorsed by the NAACP. That's the real truth.
And the person who handed him that award was Corn Pop. Pop. Yeah. Corn Pop was in the NAACP. He gave Joe Biden the award. And after the award, he proceeded to touch his blonde, hairy legs at the swimming pool. So,
yeah.
So his comment, like, basically, the interview's like 18 minutes long, and he was basically like...
Wait, really? It was only 18 minutes?
Yeah, it was...
those interviews are usually like an hour.
Yeah, it was one of those, like, kind of Zoom interviews, and Joe Biden was pressed for time, and so the interview was cut short. But, like, there were, like... we don't have enough time for this episode to go point by point with, his record on the crime bill, but there's a lot of stuff that Joe Biden said was fishy, because he was saying, like... He was obfuscating about a ton of shit that, like... oh yeah, I wrote the crime bill, but then he would say, like, actual elements that were in the crime bill he didn't support, even though it was in the crime bill that he wrote. So there's that. But toward the end, this is the thing that really got Joe Biden in some heat. Joe Biden said, basically, so toward the end of the interview, this is why it was 18 minutes. Like, he was being cut short. Like, Joe Biden was like, hey, like, one of his advisors, like, you have to wrap this up, basically. So Charlemagne was like, hey, don't treat black media like that, blah, blah, blah. And then Joe Biden was like, he's, as like his sort of final sort of clinching line before the interview ended, he said, if you have trouble deciding whether you're going to vote for me or Donald Trump, then you ain't black. And Peter, what's your response to that? I have mine.
Well, I suppose, like, there's an out, which is that I don't have any trouble deciding between voting for either of those people. I'm perfectly secure in my decision to not vote for either of them. So, it isn't, he gives some level of room, but it is more just like, yeah, I mean, he's at the highest level of, like, white familiarity is the ability to gatekeep blackness to other black people. That is like the definition of being too comfortable. Mm-hmm. And, on some level, that was 40 years in the making. I mean, yeah, people have enabled him and enabled that type of him to have that mentality, which has given him a pass to enact, all sorts of horrendous forms of racism. And somehow somehow he's been able to get through it. And, now he doesn't even remember how he got to this point, but he probably literally thinks that he's black, honestly. He probably has convinced himself he's got vitiligo or something.
And so, like, I'm glad you mentioned that, like, because that was one of my reactions I had, was basically that, I mean, first of all, like, okay, before I go on, I want to actually define what blackness is, because I think oftentimes when it comes to race, the common race discourse, that it's not just white liberals who do it. I see a lot of white leftists and white socialists and class reductionist types do this, which is like to kind of reduce blackness as sort of like this vague metaphysical thing, and it's like easy to talk about it in the abstract, in the vague, and not the concrete. So it's like blackness is something, but it's also nothing at the same time in the way people talk about it. But I like to think of blackness, and particularly African American identity, as an ethnic and national identity. Like, the idea of like the imagined community and ethnic and national identity, in a sense that like, Black America is like a nation of people. Like, essentially, we're like a nation of people within a nation. Like, America is like this settler colony nation, and Black people are a nation within that nation, essentially. And so, like, when you look at what makes a nation and an ethnic group, like, there's certain ingredients, right? So, shared history, ancestry, culture, music, food, way of life. And also I would add in like a sense of Black consciousness, like that consciousness of like, that you're Black, and that realization can kind of come at any time, either by how you grow up and your experience, or like experiencing real persecution because of your identity as being Black. So there is like an actual material reality to Black identity that is beyond just the metaphysical. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at all the sort of ingredients of what it is to be Black, Joe Biden is not that. Yeah. If anything, he's part of the identity that's responsible for oppressing Black people. So in that sense, like, he can talk familiar with Black people, but that does not mean he's a member of the African American nation of people. And I think and when Blackness gets reduced to this very vague and abstract thing, it makes it very, very easy for someone like Joe Biden to claim that he's more Black than people who are actually Black. And also, and I want to make that clear, because if you see Black America as like a nation of people, then it would make sense for that nation of people to have political interest in support of the nation of people. So it's like with reparations, right? With reparations, you're technically repairing a nation, technically. So if you support reparations, or the idea of it, then logically you have to accept the premise that Black America is a nation, because you have to repair the nation that was damaged by slavery, Jim Crow, all these systematic policies that target a specific nation of people. In the same way, like, you're dealing with like Native American people who are nations, right? Like, they're Native American nations, right? Yeah. So in that sense, like, you can see even like look on Wikipedia. If you look on Wikipedia, look up African American. Even Wikipedia says that African Americans are an ethnic group. So,
I would like to bring in somebody who wrote a pretty good work called Marxism and the National Question, which sought to work through the relationship of what they called it back then, national oppression, to class conflict. And this person, whose name is Joseph Stalin, situated a nation as such. A nation is a historically constituted, stable community of people formed on the basis of a common language, territory, economic life, and psychological makeup manifested in a common culture. Now, don't all those things apply? I mean, Ebonics is its own language.
Yeah.
So, from the Marxist perspective, it Black America, or New Africa, as the different terminologies are thrown around, does constitute like a nation in and of itself. I also, when talking about racism and Blackness, like as an experience, I love Baldwin's quote about whiteness is like a frame of mind and Blackness is a condition. So,
right, yeah. And I want to also bring up, this is something I tweeted like earlier yesterday, that I think applies to the national question. So I just finished. This is a good book, by the way. Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Frazier. And the subtitle is "The Book that Brought the Shock of Self-Revelation to Middle-Class Blacks in America." It was written in 1957, but I think it's still relevant today. But basically, one thing he pointed out that I hadn't realized quite before, but it made sense, especially as I, listening to Malcolm X's speeches. Black nationalism was actually the language of the black working class and the black masses. So he even said the Garvey movement did not attract any support from the emerging black bourgeoisie. So, and also he points out in his appeal to the masses of American as well as West Indian Negroes, Garvey exhibited a keen understanding of the hurt self-esteem and frustrations of black men in the United States. And then he goes on. This is actually, I think, a really important quote. He's talking about basically the black bourgeoisie. He said, they did not only regard his programs as fantastic, but they did not want to associate with his illiterate and poor black followers, especially since West Indians were prominent in the movement. So black nationalism, actually, I would argue, is the language of the black working class. And especially, if you go into, any black urban hood,
you'll see the red, black, and green flag.
Right, yeah, you'll see it. You'll see traces of, some language or iteration of black nationalism. And even the idea of black nationalism goes back even further than Garvey. Martin Delany, who was an African-American abolitionist, he was the first one to come up with the phrase Africa for Africans. So even the ideology of black nationalism actually has its roots in black America, in the diaspora. So, and that's one thing I want to mention, basically to define, black people as a specific national identity, but also I think it's important for leftists to know that black nationalism is part of the black political milieu. It can be synthesized and updated, but it's something that actually is organic to the black political struggle. So the way that ties in with Biden is that, yeah, it seems like I think someone in his campaign gave him some sort of pass, or not even his campaign, but I think there are too many black political class types who basically gave him a pass because it seemed like he felt comfortable saying that. It seemed like he was pissed at Charlemagne for daring to demand anything.
Well, yeah, in one of his earlier responses, he basically, when Charlemagne asked him the question shouldn't black people, black voters, demand something of the Democratic Party, and he basically was just do you know how much black support I got? Do you know how many? I win all black votes all the time for my entire career. 96% of Delaware. Black people love us. And he even was and it's not just older black. Younger blacks love me too. All black people love me. So, yeah. It's he basically was just rejected the framework outright. I mean, this is pure, bringing us to heel. He very much is asserting his dominance and all that stuff. And it's honestly, that's the most forthright, honestly, any Democratic nominee has been about that topic in recent memory. I mean, it's almost refreshing that he doesn't do all the bromides and yes, we must listen and we must lift up and hold these things and center them and all these other vague verbs that don't connote any sense of tangible or decisive action. Just yes, we understand, we listen, we've heard you, which is it really gets to the point where if you've done all this hearing, you've done all this listening, and you've done all this acknowledging, and you haven't actually done anything about the problem, that means you have less excuse. that means it's like almost unforgivable that you know the problem and you're like intentionally not doing anything about it because, you know, it would be too hard for you to do anything about. So
yeah, and I think also to that point, like, it's basically like that whole language of like, we're listening to black people, we acknowledge your lives. Like, this is actually let me bring up this there's a good tweet that I retweeted. I don't know the person who said it. The person who tweeted it, Rizkway, I think. I can't pronounce the name right. Yeah. But they said, like, this is a PSA from a comrade on Facebook, and I think this actually applies to the I would say overall sense of paternalism, because I think this is what really, I think, like, pissed a lot of black people off about what Biden said, is that it's basically white liberal paternalism toward black people. And so it's like, basically, white liberals, like, white conservatives don't give a shit about black people. Like, they're very open about that, because white conservatives in the Republican Party is fundamentally animated by white nationalism. So they don't have to pretend to even care about black people, because, like, black people as a group are not really part of their constituency. And a lot of their politics is animated by, especially now, anti-black racism, bigotry, and outright xenophobia, right? Whereas white liberals in the Democratic Party, a lot of their politics is like paying lip service to this idea of like multiculturalism, liberal representation matters, inclusion, diversity, right? All of which are equally as vague, but offered like no specific plan of action to address the material conditions of Black America. So this is the tweet. I guess someone said it on Facebook, but Rizkway screenshotted it, and they said, "White liberals, leftists, there's not really a difference. Poems, murals, long emotional diatribes, writing Black Lives Matter 100 times, all of that is for you. It doesn't bring us any closer to actually having the power to prevent these things from happening. Offer resources and skills to aid us in revolution, or shut the fuck up. If you're not doing that, or if you wouldn't catch a body for my people, you're only sharing pictures and videos and writing all of this BS because you're a sadist. I would respect you more if you came out and said that." And I think that's a great way to put it, because I do think, like, it's a similar kind of language that, like, white liberals speak when it comes to black people. It's like they don't offer any specific tangible solutions, because the actual specific tangible solutions that would be required to fix the problems that face Black America would require, like, revolutionary change that liberals don't want. So what they do have to do is, like, yes, we hear you, hashtag Black Lives Matter, yes, Queen, we listen to Beyonce and Ta-Nehisi Coates, and, like, we're reading all the right books, and here's a poem for black people, and, like, I've watched the video, and it's like all this, like, this sort of vague performative shit that, like, offers nothing. And with Biden, it's like he doesn't even care about those those bromides. He's just like, listen, you Negroes, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Get in line.
Right.
Though I will say, I mean, liberals don't have any resources to aid in revolution, really. So, no, I don't know. There was a time when, like, you know, like, the Black Panthers fundraised for the New York 23 at, like, Leonard Bernstein's house and stuff. I mean, but that, you know, back in the day. But now it is like, what are they gonna, like, what resources for revolution could they even offer? Grants, you know, and the white left. I mean, right. I mean, sometimes I do think that people, like, overestimate, like, the white left's ability to affect any change at all. So, you know, what are they, like, you know, YouTube documentaries? I mean, like, like the whole situation is screwed, and so it is like, you have, like, basically a defenseless people, and their allies are just, like, completely, you know, in the wilderness, just you know, on drugs all the time. So they're not going to be much use. I do think, like, there is some level. I mean, certainly that, like, paternalistic, you know, voyeuristic thing is you know, operating, but it is very much like, I don't know if it's always the dominant thing on the left, so to speak, but it doesn't change the fact that like that's definitely a phenomenon.
Right. Yeah, and they put white liberals and leftists together, and like, you know, I think what you're getting at is that, like, you know, it helps to make that distinction between white leftists who are actual leftists versus just straight up white mainstream liberals.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, because the other thing is, like, liberalism doesn't have to be on the left at all. Like,
no, right.
That's like a particularly American phenomenon where we've associated liberal with left, but that's not true, like, historically or around the world. Like, there are many places, like Australia, for example, where, like, the Liberal Party is the right-wing party, you know? Of course, every party in Australia is a right-wing party, but it's not the furthest right. There's, like, a party that's to the left of the Liberal Party, or, like, in the UK, like, the Liberal Democrats. It's like liberalism, we just need to completely divorce ourselves from it.
Right. Right. And actually, that's a good segue into like these recent like, again, these things happened back to back, right? So first there was a Joe Biden "you ain't black" comment, and then after that came I think it was a couple days, so there's this video of it was taken in New York City's Central Park, I guess this place called the Ramble. So there was a white woman and a black guy. So white woman's name is Amy Cooper. Black guy's name is Christian Cooper. So the video was taken by Christian Cooper, and so he sees Amy Cooper with her dog in the park without a leash. So apparently the rules stipulate that, like, okay, if you walking your dog, you need to have a leash. I want to pause here and say, like, if you really want to see white entitlement, particularly white liberal entitlement, you should look at how white people interact with animals versus how they treat black people. This is a really good example of this, because I think because even some of the responses to this situation, when people are like, "Oh my God, I feel so bad for the dog." So what happened is the Christian was like, "Hey, you know, you need to put a leash on your dog. It's the rules." And he was bird watching, apparently. This happened like sometime in the morning, and she was like, just got in his face, like, "Why are you filming me?" Blah 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 blah. And then the video's like a minute long, and she calls the cops, and she says, "There's an African American man threatening me and my dog." Blah 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 blah. And her voice, like, she gets more and more like irate. Like, the tone of her voice, it seems like she sounds like she's in like immediate danger, like imminent danger. Like there's and so anyway, the video goes viral, and people are like, you know, there's been this whole debate about like whether you should say Karen and blah blah blah, like, you know,
but say whatever you want, right?
But Amy Cooper is like, has become the latest example of Karen, like a very vindictive white woman. Defending white space from troublesome black people.
I hadn't realized that it was like actually she who was like breaking the law, and, you know, yes, this insolent black man dared to point it out. Yeah. Oh. And if you think about like who even would be in Central Park at this time, like at this point, like who is even allowed to live in the Upper West Side, you know?
Right.
It is like I'm sure that, you know, any interaction she's ever had with a black person that isn't like someone on the subway doing tricks is like, terrifying for her.
And I mentioned the animal, and I want to kind of tie this in because like, I think there's something to be said about like white people, white space, and animals. And if you listen to what she said about like this African American man, this evil black man is threatening me and my dog. So it's not just her, but it's like the dog is on an equal level as her. It's like the dog is like a tiny white person, basically. It's like basically the dog is a tiny white person who barks. And so it's like my space as a white person is like, I'm white, my white womanhood, my dog, who's also a fellow white person, and this space, which is like, I've somehow claimed this space for whiteness, and so any black person who interrupts that space, I'm like, it's just like, oh my god, how dare you? Like, there's something very, very territorial about whiteness, and when that territory is somehow interrupted by, you know, any sort of black confidence or anything or any sense of expression, is met with particularly in this case, access to law enforcement and the hand of the police state to enforce white space. And I wanted to mention the dog because I think, particularly with well-off white liberals like this type that we're talking about, Amy Cooper. By the way, so once the video went viral, so her dog got taken away and she got fired from her job. And she was
animal control came for her?
Right. She was the VP.
That is a fate worse than death for someone like that.
Exactly. That's why I say, like, in this scenario, the dog is like a fellow white person. Like, the dog is not an animal, it's a fellow white person. So, in that sense, it's like, okay, the dog's life is worth more than the life of a black person. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, like, it's not just me, it's my dog. The dog is a tiny little white person. That's why, like, I treat the dog like me. And, like, but black people, oh my god, like, they're less than the dog. Like, so it's not even just, I don't even think it's like white people liking animals per se, but it's like the whole psychology of whiteness and the territoriality of whiteness extends to the dog.
Well, white people fetishize animals because they know they've created such a shitty society where everyone treats human beings like crap, so they project all of their, what wants and desires onto the animal to distract them and to justify their misanthropy, because they apparently don't know how to, like, live with each other, I guess. I've always thought it to be extremely weird and extremely confusing. Like, you can have a pet, and you can love the pet, and you don't have to be like, I just wish that all humans were dogs, and I just love animals, like, that are my slaves and don't ever get to talk back to me. And those are the animals that I love, and I love them more than I love people, I guess, because people... Well, now they can't be slaves, and they do talk back, and so...
Yeah, like, people are actual humans with self-determination, and how dare they? Like, that sense of, like, any sort of, like, black self-determination. And in this case, it's like, hey, just a black dude who's, like, reminding her of the rules. It's like, how dare you? You have violated my white space, which includes my dog. I think there is an article, actually, that I think it was written by Naira Burton, but people have pointed this out. I think that... these kinds of calls, like, it's hold on. Oh, here we go. Yeah. I think it was, Nyla Burton. The article is Amy Cooper and Protecting White Spaces. And yeah, like, it's, and the spaces extend not just to parks, but also, like, Starbucks, banks, drugstores, delis, university common rooms. There is actually, Elijah Anderson's 2015 paper, The White Space, and this is I'm quoting from the Nyla Burton article. She said, so he writes that such spaces reinforce a normative sensibility in settings in which black people are typically absent, not expected, or marginalized when present. In turn, blacks often refer to such settings colloquially as the white space, a perceptual category, and they typically approach that space with care. And so it's like, if you can connect the white space to settler colonialism, right? Like, if whiteness is a settler colonial identity, then it could extend to space.
Well, I mean, when you said territoriality, you're exactly right in that, like, yes, there is this constant, like, awareness of turf. Like, yes, being white on this continent requires constant vigilance, because on some level, you're aware of, like, who you are, why you're here, that you're really not supposed to be here, and that the only way your future and existence is secure is through violence. Right. Like, I was thinking about, like, Fanon's situation of colonialism is pure violence, and I was thinking about, like, how, America really doesn't even have, like, some basis of sovereignty that is, like, popular, like, it, or, like, as a nation, Right. In the same sense, I mean, it is not really. I mean, Black America is more of a nation than the United States of America, really. because there's no actual like social ties or framework on which like the sovereignty of the government can rest. So it is really just maintained. America's sovereignty really is just maintained through pure pure military force.
Right. Yeah, and it has to. Yeah, and it's also like within that white territorial mindset. I think there's also the subconscious knowledge that they know that this land was taken unfairly to an extent. So their fear is that like, okay, the biggest threat to white territoriality is uprisings by Native Americans or Black people. And like, I'll recommend again The Apocalypse of Settler Colonialism by Gerald Horne, because he digs into this historically. And basically it's like yeah, like it's I think within the white American consciousness and the its political id, it's like, okay, we constantly have to be vigilant to guard white space against Black people and Native people, because they got that land and it's also like they got that land at the expense of Black and Indigenous people. Yeah. So it's like they have to be extra vigilant against Black and Indigenous people because they got the land through exploiting us.
But it isn't necessarily like a direct, conscious phenomenon, because we're like 3 or 4 orders removed from that. But what maintains is just like, the sense of like private property, just and also just the need for there always to be some fear. Like you always have to be on the lookout. They're just like nothing can ever be okay, despite living in the quote unquote greatest country in the world, where you have so much freedom, you're like, drowning in it. But somehow, even with all that freedom, still, you have to be in like fight or flight mode 100% of the time, because you just never know what can happen, because, this is not a place that particularly values life, which is, as we've just seen over the past 2 months.
And speaking of not valuing life, George Floyd in Minneapolis was, I didn't bother to watch the video because I knew enough about it that's like, it's very similar to the Eric Garner thing, because on the video he said, "I can't breathe." And there is a cop like basically having their knees on his neck and he's being pinned to the ground, unarmed. He was basically subdued already. And so the guy was saying, "I can't breathe," and then he later died. So this is in Minneapolis. And I do want to share...
what do you even call that? An officer-involved strangling?
It's just... just at this point, it's just like, it's, almost cold-blooded murder. I do want to share this Billboard article. I thought it was interesting. The headline is, "George Floyd was a member of Houston's legendary screwed up clique in the 90s. So like, George Floyd had an actual like, music career. And even Christian Cooper, I think he was he's a comic book like artist, I think.
Nice.
So it's just like I wanted to, because I didn't know this about George Floyd, that he was so I guess like he had I guess in the clique, I guess they had freestyle. So it says their efforts featured familiar songs, fun through the screwed and chopped filter, as well as some original freestyles from the large extended SUC family, which included Floyd, so Floyd was known as Big Floyd, among other well-known members such as Big Mo, Lil Flip, Big Pokey, Pat Pat, and affiliates Lil Troy and UGK. So, like, he was involved in the 90s hip-hop scene in Houston, which I thought was, interesting. But it's like, this is just another case of a Black person just basically being, either humiliated, accosted, or just straight up killed by law enforcement and white racism.
And in Minneapolis, which is supposed to be super progressive, but clearly has a history of this.
It's one of the actually, I was on Kay Swiftly's Twitch stream, and she's in Minneapolis, and she was pointing out that it's one of the most unequal cities and deeply segregated. Yeah, there's this book. Sure. I would recommend reading Evicted by Matthew Desmond, and he really digs into this about like housing, like racial inequality through housing in Minneapolis, and like is very, very stark. Right now as we speak, we're recording this May 27th, 2020, and there's people are already protesting in Minneapolis, and people been breaking windows of cop cars in the police department. But
getting it in. I mean,
yeah,
why not? Why not?
Yeah, fuck it.
They're gonna tear gas you anyway. I mean, they wouldn't let anyone protest right now, so yeah, get it in.
And everyone's wearing, face masks, both for health reasons and obviously, like, I mean, they almost have a dual purpose. They have a dual purpose at this point. But like, we were talking about this before we recorded, that a lot of the reactions are the same, and it almost sounds like a repeat of 2014. Like, people are saying, Black Lives Matter, enough is enough. I think I've noticed, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, nothing ever, like, the movement never, like, matured beyond, like, a media campaign, really. I mean, it never really was able to, get sink its teeth in and, like, become an institutional presence or anything like that.
Yeah.
Have, like, a longer view of history. And so, yeah, I understand that. Then it's all the celebrities who are like, oh, shit, we're doing this again?
Yeah.
Like, God. And then, like, oh, I can't believe we still have to. Why? I don't know why you wouldn't be able to believe that we're still doing this when nothing changed. But, yeah, it's. I mean, no, like, obviously Trump's not going to do anything. But, you think Biden would do anything? No. I mean, nobody's going to do anything.
Trump tweeted something about, like, oh, we're going to investigate the death of George Floyd. But it's like, I mean, we've heard that shit.
With the Trump Department of Justice.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
We're totally going to get something from that, yeah. I mean, and, I was thinking, and it's like, when it comes to, like, Black Lives Matter and, like, it's hard to, I wouldn't say Black Lives Matter was really a movement. I also want to mention, I forgot, like, Breonna Taylor, who was a healthcare worker who was just fucking shot in her home in Louisville in March. Like, she was shot multiple times. So it's like, we talked about Ahmaud Arbery, now it's Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and then, the case of, Christian Cooper, he didn't die, thankfully, but, like, Amy Cooper calling the cops on him was, like, damn, basically a fucking death threat. So it's like, okay, we're seeing the same, like, sort of like the same, like, oh, say this person's name and remember who they are. And I get it, like, okay, you want to humanize a person, right? Okay, fine, but, like, these sort of performative social media exercises of, like, acknowledging that black people exist is not going to bring back black people from death or prevent the death from happening in the first place. So
the other thing that always kind of bugged me about it is, like, it's like, oh, be like, oh, this person was a hero or a martyr or something like that, when, like, they didn't ask for any of that. It's not like they signed up to die for this. I mean, it really, like, they were targeted and killed, and, they let, these people led ordinary lives. They were just regular people who ended up in, a certain situation with, a cop who I guess had, like, taken an extra Adderall that day, so he was feeling super aggro or something. And, it's not like it feels, I don't know. I don't like the idea that, this is a thing, like, it's some sort of heroic act when it's, I mean, I understand the importance of, like, making the death significant, but I don't know. It seems like a rhetorical trap, and I don't necessarily know how to get out of it.
I mean, like, it kind of reminds me of, I mean, I don't know if you and I are becoming or already are Afro-pessimists, but I do think, like, instances like these, I think, prove the overall Afro-pessimist point, which is, like...
I mean, in the near term, I'm an Afro-pessimist in the sense of, like, I don't believe anything will qualitatively change in the system we have now. It almost becomes a tautology at that point, but it is like, yeah,
right.
there's no point in appealing to any of the people in power to change any of this stuff, really.
Yeah, and also, like, I mean, two things, like, you know, like, these sorts of same reactions, like, these attempts to humanize black people basically reinforce the notion that blackness is social death, in the sense that black people are only relevant when we die. So it's like, whatever humanity we had that existed before black people got shot, before Breonna Taylor was killed, before George Floyd was killed, before Christian Cooper got, you know, almost killed by a white woman in Central Park. These people are like, they're normal people like everybody else, and living normal lives. And I'm pretty, like you said, like, they didn't really ask to be this face of Black Lives Matter, or like, and it's like, you know, it's like there's no like, black people aren't seen as human until like we are abused or killed by the system. Anything else beforehand, it's like our humanity is not even recognized. Like, we don't even exist as a people, which is why I wanted to define African Americans as an ethnic group, because it's a way of like, as like, there is a peoplehood that's there, but because we talk about blackness and this vague abstract shit, it's like, okay, in that sense we don't exist, but we only exist socially when, you know, police bullets are riddling our bodies. But I do think, like, I was thinking about this, like, just to thinking of like ways forward, not like quite like a 10-point plan specifically, but like how to, you know, sort of find a way out of this morass. And I was thinking that I do think that in the same way that the United States should relearn the language of class struggle for progressive and, you know, socialist change, like, you have to relearn the language of class struggle. I think black people should relearn the language of black nationalism. And so, like, stuff like Black Lives Matter, I think, should be about, like, okay, how about Black Power? Because Black Lives Matter and that kind of rhetoric, all it does is, like, look to the morality of white America for salvation. It's like, black people can only become human when we appeal to the morality of white America in order to achieve salvation. Which I don't think that's not how liberation or achieving your humanity works. Like, you have to assert it and take it. Like, you have to you know, take power in whatever way you can, and you have to assert it, because, like, I'm black, I'm human, I don't need white America to acknowledge my humanity, quote unquote. I don't have to appeal to them to acknowledge my humanity, because my humanity is self-evident. The issue is living under a society in which, like, there's constant systematic humiliation, degradation, and death because of what I look like, because of my nationhood. Like, that's the problem. And I think, like, you know, I guess rhetorically or whatever, or politically, I think we have to relearn that language of black nationalism as a way to move forward, because I think, because all these, like, sort of moral appeals to white liberal salvation, like, it just doesn't work. But I do think that what has worked historically is some form of nationalism and class struggle. And I think, like, that language has to be relearned. And that's why I brought up the quote from E. Franklin Frazier, because black nationalism, like, there is a class element to it, in the sense of, like, you're appealing to the heart of the black masses. And to affect revolutionary change, you have to tap into that.
Yeah.
So
the other thing, that's definitely true. I think in the post BLM era, I don't see any other way forward than that. But the other thing that is, like, even in the civil rights era, it was like white liberals still had this sort of patriotic belief in, like, the goodness of America and that America could be improved.
right.
or whatever, you know, and also the Soviet Union was running mad propaganda about, you know, the reality of apartheid in the South, which yeah, didn't look good for all the African, you know, liberation movements that we wanted to co-opt, you know. But the point is that now, like, that vision doesn't exist among the white ruling class. Like, they are like the shingles are starting to fall off the structure, and, you know, white people, like the white ruling class, is not going to be in any mood to be doing black people any favors anytime soon. I mean, that's just, like, as the empire, like, faces, like, the inevitable decline, like, they're going, you know, the ruling class is going to, you know, look more towards retrenchment than it is, you know, the idea of, like, yeah, well, you know, let's improve ourselves. Like, no, like, there's no improving going on. So yeah, I mean, just from a, you know, sort of purely practical, real politic sort of outlook, it's like, yeah, trying to appeal to their conscience or whatever is going to work even less than it did before, because
Right.
that's just not how anyone's in the mood, really.
And also, wait, I'll mention
Q. I mean, that's what that Biden interview was really about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, like, also there are some weird. Should I share these problematic tweets? I mean, they're just like, oh, fuck it, I'll share them.
Yeah, then we can transition to other problematic tweets from Blue Checks.
There we go. Yeah,
because I do want to get that off.
Yeah. I mean, someone, Tara Dublin, something, tweeted, speaking as a single white woman, if I encountered Christian Cooper in the Ramble, I'd use my phone to get his number, not call the cops. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. And she also had, like, the brown and black fist emoji. And then Jill Filipovich said, so Christian Cooper is a snack and a nerd and not at all intimidating. I'm going to read that again because that first part, considering the context of what happened, there is something just blatantly ugh. So Christian Cooper is a snack and a nerd and not at all intimidating, which makes this whole story all the more egregious. But even if a person does
But if he were intimidating, then...
She says, you know, she does say, but even if a person does physically fit your idea of scary, you still don't get to call the cops on an innocent man who didn't do anything wrong. Okay, so, like, at least the last part, like, she kind of, like, somewhat redeemed herself. But the first part is, like, look, if you find him attractive, fine, but, like, you don't need to fucking tweet it.
Well,
just, like...
there's, like, yeah, that's, like, the type of, you know, I don't care. I mean, they brought it up, so we have to talk about it. But right. It's, like, yeah, there's, like, the kind of white woman who, like, believes that, like, her horniness has, like, salvation potential. Like, they're going to save America through their thirst. Because, like, I don't know, I guess they believe, like, you know, their reproductive powers have, like, that level of, like, civilizing potential or something. And so that's why they, like, fetishize the, like, tortured black man. And I mean, this really goes, like this was the whole thing in the South, right? Is that you have, like, the, you know, paranoid, elegant, you know, chivalrous white gentleman who is, like, trying to protect the fragility of white womanhood. And meanwhile, like, you know, those same white women are, like, you know, pursuing, like, black men pretty aggressively. And then, like, yeah, then they get caught, and then it turns around, and then the black guy gets hanged, right? That happened, you know, too many times to count. Right. I mean, not just in the South, you know, all over. Because there was just, like, it's just, like, why would you have to make it about, I mean, It's white. It's very white. It's like, why would you have to make it about your vagina? Like,
right.
like,
And and also like the context of this, because like the other element is that like Amy Cooper, a white woman, also Nyla Burton also pointed out that she's a liberal. She's not a Trump supporter, because some people were saying like, oh, maybe Amy Cooper's a Trump supporter. Actually, she's a Democrat.
In the Upper West Side, come on.
Right. And in that situation, white womanhood was weaponized against Christian Cooper, right? Because she used her white woman tears on that call to basically make up a lie in order to put putting his life in danger, right? So like white womanhood was weaponized in a very specific way against black life, specifically black male life, but black life. And then it's like, okay, like that's the really shitty part of it, right? Then it's like, oh, okay, these white liberal feminists who think they're doing justice are like, I'm going to use my superiority as a white woman and perform thirst in order to achieve justice for a black person. It's like, well, neither respond. Like, I mean, the other like, it's yeah, like there's no black liberation that comes through white flesh.
Like that's the kind of shit that they get mad at men for doing all the time. Not to be like that, but it is. I mean, it is literally like taking something and then taking like, you know, an objectively bad like situation, then trying to make it about your dick. I mean, it's like the exact same thing,
right?
Like why would you ever think that is an appropriate sentiment,
right,
to share?
And
like,
and also
in the aftermath of of this stuff, like.
Right. And also, like, you know, if they happen to think like, oh, Christian Cooper's an attractive dude, okay, that's fine, but just keep it to yourself. You don't have to like make like, I think the thing that just irks me about it is like they're using a kind of performative thirst for like political liberation and think that they're doing a good right.
That's such a cursed phrase.
I mean, it's performative in the sense that
not
like,
even real thirst.
It's right. It's performative in the sense that like they have to publicize their thirst for a black man, and they think they're doing some form of justice, right? And it's like, and it ties what it does. It ties black liberation through desire for white flesh. Like I think, like that's what it reinforces. Like, okay, the only way that black people can get liberation or any form of justice is through some form of desire for white flesh. And so it's like these women are acting like I'm doing him a favor by announcing how attracted I am to him in order to do him justice. But it's like, you don't have to say that. And like also, again, it reinforces this notion that black liberation has to come through white flesh. And this is not like a comment on interracial dating. People want to like, look, if people want to fuck whoever they want, fine. But it's like, it doesn't have to be like trying to turn it into some sort of statement of like, yeah, the way I'm in solidarity with black people is like I'm so fucking horny for black men. Like that's not solidarity. You just find out you have
fetishization.
It's fetishizing. If you find them attractive, that's fine, but you don't have to make it into a larger political statement. Like it's not something that like helps black people in this situation. If anything, it's like, and what's funny is that like I think what they're doing is like, again, it's this sort of like performative white liberal humanizing of blackness that actually just like winds up becoming further dehumanizing because it attaches blackness to any sort of like desire for whiteness, like because it always comes back to white people.
I guess the charitable interpretation is just that, you know, they've been everyone gets super horny during quarantine. So it just kind of came out because that's honestly those kinds of people should know. Like anyone with a salon column should know better than to tweet something like that. But
speaking of,
you know, people with salon columns and blue checks and New York media jobs should know better. This sort of, you know, and admittedly this is a very minor controversy in the grand scheme of things and is probably already out of the discourse news cycle, but I found it very interesting. Jia Tolentino, who is a writer for The New Yorker, and has a published book of essays, and someone who, like, you know, I'll occasionally read her stuff because she is like The New Yorker's, like, token millennial who talks about, like, millennial stuff. So I'm curious, like, or like when they want to talk about late capitalism, she's like the one person on the New Yorker masthead who knows what late capitalism means. So
she's basically like millennial angst as a result of late capitalism, basically.
But
like that kind of voice.
It's not as if like I feel like my life would have been materially deprived if I had never read anything she wrote. But she's not terrible. But apropos of nothing, as far as I can discern, she wrote a blog post about I guess the Tumblr cancel culture crowd had gotten a smell of flesh, and so they were about to descend on her, and she thought she could head them off on the path by exposing the criminal case her parents went through, where it turns out her parents are the kinds of people who import labor from the Philippines to at exorbitant prices to, I guess, teach in poor American public schools. And apparently sometimes they do this without actually having a job lined up at the other end. And, then the people that they really screwed over have no choice but to go to the government. And then the government finds out. And, admittedly, 2003 or whatever, there is very much I'm not going to get too much into the case itself because I don't, a lot of terrible shit is legal. A lot of, there's like a pretty broad definition of human trafficking, honestly.
Yeah.
But, the more instructive thing was that upon this, upon her, this self-own, all your favorite, if assuming you have any favorites because you're brain poisoned like us, all your favorite media people on Twitter immediately jumped in to say solidarity, and I'm so sorry and I'm here for you and all this stuff, and it was like it was pretty shocking. I mean, and not just like the libs, but I mean people we understood to be pretty solidly on the left were like yeah.
I read the blog. I don't want to go too much into the the specific facts of the case, because I think like my instant reaction was honestly less about Jia and her specific family and her specific case and Jia correcting the inaccuracies, because like I think, to be fair, she has a right to correct any inaccuracies about her family that are publicized. So I think that's fair.
But they weren't publicized. Yeah.
Right. And here's the thing is that, like, my thing is like, okay, I'll backtrack and contextualize. So when I went to Guantanamo in June of 2013, I noticed at the base, like, there were a lot of Filipino and foreign workers and who were working at the base, which I thought was like interesting. It never crossed my mind like, oh, I didn't know that there were foreign workers here. Like, why is that? And I remember, talking to people about it, and then I did some further reading, and turns out like there is a huge phenomenon of the U.S. basically trafficking labor from essentially global South countries like the Philippines to work on U.S. military bases, do stuff like construction, base maintenance, and stuff like that. But usually, like, they suffer abuses like, really shitty wages, exploitation, and I think, to some extent, like, sexual abuse. Like, so, like, actual real serious labor violations. And it's often preyed on people who are coming from poor, desperate countries. So, and I remember I wrote a story about this for Truth Out, like, in 2013. And so, and also, one of the sources I looked at was actually a investigative story published in The New Yorker, which is where Jia Tolentino works. So, given that, like, I don't know all the details of labor trafficking, but even when I read her response, like, there were things that just felt fishy to me, that, like, even, like, let's say, one of the things that makes cases like these really difficult to prove whether they're legal or illegal are the layers of subcontracting in like that chain of from when they are, you know, recruited from a country like the Philippines to when they wind up working at a U.S. military base, or even in Gulf countries like in the Persian Gulf. And so Sana Saeed, friend of mine, who I she's a really solid journalist, but she tweeted out, she said, "I see human trafficking was being minimized by journalists on Twitter today. Cool." And like, I thought that was a good response, because that's what stunned me. It wasn't so much Jia, you know, saying like, "Hey, look, this is like these are inaccurate about my family, blah blah blah." What shocked me is that like the response from journalists whose job is to report on these issues, like the instant response was to defend Jia and not look into the larger issue of labor trafficking, particularly in the Philippines and around the world, because that is a real issue, regardless of it. And let's assume, I'm going to assume for the sake of argument, let's assume everything that Jia is saying is true about her family. That does not negate the reality of labor trafficking, particularly of Filipino migrant workers. I think it's Esha Legal. She had a really good thread where she explains, like, I mean, she kind of questioned the details of the case, but she also did say, like, she includes other sources on like how, you know, teachers are trafficked and all this, like, kind of really just shady shit that like that should be talked about more rather than just like.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really got me, the reason I even want to talk about it is because, like you, I mean, you know, we have, and I guess this is extraordinary amongst the intelligentsia of the United States, but we have an awareness of things like structural underdevelopment, specifically, and also the legacy of U.S. fucking imperialism. Do these fucking blue checks even understand that the Philippines was literally a U.S. colony from 1901 to 1945, where we did a counterinsurgency that killed like a ninth of the population or something like that? Yep. I mean, do they understand that literally like the biggest export of the Philippines is labor? Like, it is a labor colony. Like, that is its role in the global economy right now. And so, you know, when I was reading it, and when I saw like, oh yeah, my parents like arranged to bring teachers over from the Philippines, I was like, wait, what?
Right.
I mean, and the
thing, there were like, and sorry to cut you off, but like, there were things even in Gia's defense that raised some flags. That's what got me off. It's like, there is enough things in what she said that like raised some flags that like anyone with some kind of critical eye should have bothered to look into more.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, one thing that I think is particularly heinous is that, like, you know, someone who I guess is some sort of self-appointed spokesperson of the immigrant struggle, like, their family is directly profiting off that exploitation. I mean, it's so, you know, messed up. It's so perverted to assert yourself as someone who's like your family is part of the problem. And it doesn't matter how legal it is. I mean, like, that's not the point. Because like, yes, okay, yeah, ICE doesn't give a shit about, like, you know, Filipino teachers being exploited. They give a shit when, like, somebody's, you know, fucking up, and then they have to pay attention to it, right? But, you know, there's no way, like I saw some people try to like minimize like exactly how terrible the conditions were.
Yeah.
You know, or like, you know, Gia was like, no, there's no way all of that's true. I'm not going to speculate specifically what is or isn't true, but here's what I will say is that the only way like that practice is profitable, of, you know, bringing people across the world to teach in McAllen, Texas, which is one of the poorest cities in the country, if not the poorest city in the country, or Chiranon did an actual like focus on this, you know, where they actually acknowledge like the structural factors, and, you know, the same phenomenon happens in Baltimore, right? It's like, yeah, these places that, like, I guess Teach for America wasn't doing a good enough job, so this is what they have to do now. And it is like, yeah, hyper exploitation, and this is the kind of thing where it's like, if the left can't, if that's not their instinctive reaction, if they can't understand that pattern, and if they can't, understand how this is situated in that framework, and their thing is just like, oh no, this is just, some sort of misunderstanding. It's like right. this is the thing that makes me third worldist. This is the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, there's no hope for America. If these people whose job it is to know better can't figure this out, like, then yeah, it's like, we're screwed.
So I want to bring this up. So I just looked up the article I wrote, and like I did a story on this. God damn it. There's there is an article published in the New Yorker where Jia Tolentino is employed at by Sarah Stillman. The article is called "The Invisible Army" and is from the June 6, 2011 issue. And the subtitle of the article is "For Foreign Workers on U.S. Bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, War Can Be Hell." I'm gonna read a few quotes to contextualize this.
Can you imagine that shit?
So she says, the Pentagon's invisible army, more than 70,000 cooks, cleaners, construction workers, fast food clerks, electricians, and beauticians from the world's poorest countries who service U.S. military logistical contracts. And she says, while the expansion of private security contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan is well known, armed security personnel account for only 16% of the overall contracting force. The vast majority, more than 60% of the total in Iraq, aren't hired guns but hired hands. She also goes on to say, these workers, primarily from South Asia and Africa, often live in barbed wire compounds on U.S. bases, eat at meager chow halls, and host dance parties featuring Nepalese romance ballads and Ugandan church songs. A large number are employed by fly-by-night subcontractors who are financed by the American taxpayer, but who often operate outside the law. And then I'll read this quote. So many of the workers, the actual victims who were interviewed for Stillman's report, recount having been robbed of wages, injured without compensation, subjected to sexual assault, and held in conditions resembling indentured servitude by their subcontractor bosses.
That's what it is. It's indentured servitude. That's not an exaggeration at all.
Right.
You owe these people half your check for 5 years.
And some of these things that, again, I want to emphasize, this article is in the New Yorker, Tolentino's place of employment. So people should fucking know better. Like, this is actually this actually like is pretty embarrassing that like there was a story published in the New Yorker in 2011 on this very issue, and their response was to overlook that. Which again, like I said, even if the case of specifically of Gia's family, like, let's say like what she's saying is true and that like the case is unfair, fine. But there is a larger issue that like needs to be talked about and should not be brushed aside.
Yeah, well, it's just like I mean, that was the point, and she thought she was good enough at writing to write her way out of this, and I guess for all intents and purposes, she succeeded because by heading it off and framing it as, oh, it was just this big misunderstanding, and ICE just came after us. You know how us black and brown people are afraid of ICE. You know how it is. I mean, she literally made an argument like that. Yeah, and it's like. No, if your reaction wasn't like, wait, hold up, wait, what? And your action was just like, I'm so sorry for you. Like, no, screw you. I'm sorry. Like, you're you're the problem. You're the problem. You're the reason why like the left, is completely feckless and just functionless, because the people whose job it is to know the truth and tell the truth just like miss this giant giant thing,
huge and underreported. Yeah, like vastly underreported. Like there are stories of this, and I'm glad that like Esha Legal, I'll put in the show notes Esha Legal's Twitter thread, because she posts more articles that basically back up my story and Sarah Stillman's story. That like this is a very serious issue about like basically international labor trafficking.
Yeah, well, this is a product of intentional imperial underdevelopment. I mean, that's after the U.S. stopped being after the Philippines stopped being a formal colony, then it just did neocolonialism, where it propped up a bunch of shitty dictators, up until now. And and like while basically leaving that country like underdeveloped because it's not profitable for Western capital to develop the Philippines. It's it's profitable to utilize it as a source of cheap labor and raw materials. And that's what happens.
I want to double down on a point you said about like, pointing out that the response from basically kind of like the Blue Check Mafia or whatever you want to call them, like the sort of Blue Check Twitter media class. Like their response is very, very revealing because this is like a group of people who are expected to know better, right? But what this is a demonstration of that actually is, I think, very, very pervasive and ugly is that like within media, like there is a class element, like there's a class component to the media, and it reflects certain class interests because like, look, the New Yorker, like, that's a coveted position amongst writers to write for the New Yorker. Like,
I don't know why. But...
I don't know why either, but like, there's a kind of social cachet and status you get for being a writer at the New Yorker, and I'm sure like a very nice paycheck, right? Yeah. So there like amongst media people, like there are social circles that intersect with class circles. And that kind of like I was saying about socialization amongst black people, there's a kind of socialization that goes on amongst these types of people. And they all know each other, they all talk to each other. And so like that kind of socialization breeds certain interest. And so when one of the members of the groups of that social circle is, let's say, offended in some way, people defend them because it's not really, because I think in this case, it's not just of defending Jia, but it's defending the integrity of the social circle of the sort of liberal media New York kind of blue check Twitter class. And so it's like they're more interested in defending the integrity of that social status of those media people versus finding the truth. And I think like their response, that's what like I found really illuminating, is that it revealed like, okay, like there's some actual class interest going on.
Well, they actually do know what class solidarity means, so now they can't pretend that they don't know we're talking about when we talk about working class solidarity. I think that there are two phenomena going on there. One is that they do know the situation, but they also know that their family trees have something equally distasteful, so they have to defend her. The second, I think, is that a lot of these people, despite being considering themselves as public servants, or actually loathe the public, and they despise, especially like the Twitter hordes or the Tumblr hordes. They despise the rabble. They believe themselves to be better. They believe themselves to be literally a better class of person because they have these jobs, And so it is very much like, excuse me, like how could anyone, it's like when people believe that like, I don't know, like killing a journalist is like worth 3 lives of a regular person or something. Like it's kind of, there's just this mentality that it's like, I am an extra person. I am more than one person. I am more important than the regular person because I consider myself to be a journalist.
And I also think like to kind of extrapolate a little bit further, I also think like that's why a lot of those people don't like Chapo Trap House, like because I think like there's some real media envy amongst those people against Chapo Trap House, because like Chapo Trap House, like I mean look, they make a lot of money on Patreon, like, but it's largely, their operations largely like grassroots. Like I don't think, as far as I know, they're not taking like Coke money. You know what I mean? Like they're not taking like money from slave owners and shit.
Some of their popularity was like familiarity within those circles, but very much because they don't even pretend to be journalists, then they can like call the game out for what it is, and that's what makes people mad.
Right.
And
exactly.
Is that like, they can just say the thing that these self-appointed journalists can't say because they're so busy upholding their little their little guild or whatever. That it gets in the way of the truth.
And also, like Chapo Trap House and I think similar podcast are proving like in terms of a financial model, they're equally as successful, quote unquote, in terms of like being a funded media apparatus that's independent of like the conventional media institutions and the conventional media class interests. So like because like in terms of like how like the sort of left podcast ecosystem works, because it is largely grassroots, and we could talk about like okay maybe like like non-white podcasters make less money than like white podcasters. Yeah, true, but structurally for the most part, like their funding sources, it's not like the right wing where like it's all connected to like fucking oil money and like coke money and all this evil shit. And then
both kinds of coke money,
right? And liberals is like a lot of like weird non-profit sector money, foundation money, tech money, shit like that. It's like both sides, like liberals and conservative, represent different sets of like class interest in terms of the larger economy. And like left media is like, okay, we're gonna basically create like a sort of media ecosystem that's independent of those class interests, which gives them a level of freedom to basically call the shit for what it is. And I think like when they get mad at like the sort of left Twitter rabble, it's like like we can kind of say shit for what it is without having to kiss the ass of those kinds of class interests. And I think like that's part of like the real envy and just hatred that like a lot of these like sort of liberal blue checks have for left Twitter.
Yeah, whenever they have to acknowledge its existence. I mean, they'd rather pretend it doesn't. Well, I think we've got most of what's been grinding our gears out for tonight.
We went from fucking Biden and police shit to media class interests.
It's I mean, we don't have to. I mean, we can talk about. I don't know. I mean, it's good to get off of quarantine, though. Yeah, going back to work now, and the whole situation is fucked. Like so we're supposed to be open, but we can't have inside seating. So, we have like actually, in Maine for some reason restaurants can only have outdoor seating, which we have enough outdoor seating that we might be okay, but. Most places only have like 2 or 3 tables. That's screwed. The other fucked up thing is that the Department of Labor sent out this mass email saying that, quote unquote, because of unemployment insurance fraud, like everyone's payment this week is getting pushed back 2 days, and they're reinstituting the wait period and actually making it longer for new claims. So, they very much use like this whole identity theft thing as an excuse, but. Yeah, they like the reason everything's opening back up is to get everyone off unemployment, and that's more important than. Like that figure is more important than the economy, and certainly more important than public health. So, I don't know how any of this is going to work, because people will be open, but they can't actually do business. So, shit's gonna get real dumb next month, as far as I can tell. I don't know. So yeah, that's the real world, and not it's all the real world, and it's all stupid.
I like. Oh yeah, when it comes to teaching, it's like, I'm kind of looking for like online teaching jobs because that seems to be the way of the future now, because it's unsafe to. I mean, like I think it's very very fucking unsafe to. Open up school during a fucking pandemic, but it's like switching from okay, you already learned how to like teach in person, but like now you have to learn how to teach online and through a computer. It's like, oh great, another skill I have to learn, and I was not prepared for that. Like the job market and reality of capitalism is very very weird during this pandemic, and it's like no one really. I feel like a lot of people just don't know what the fuck to do.
Nobody from the top down. I mean, the announcement came from the governor like today, and everyone's like planning to open up on Monday, and it's just like, yeah, now everyone's mad. It's like, you know what? Fine. I'm, it makes me sympathetic to the Republicans that hate the Democratic governor. So the whole thing's just stupid. It's like nobody has any real, everyone's just in CYA mode. So nobody's actually, there was like a brief period where there's like, yeah, the heroic governor is going to take charge. And yeah, nobody's doing that anymore. Everyone's covering their own ass, and not doing a very good job of it. So we're really, I don't want to say we're bungling this, but I don't know what else to say. We really are going about this whole thing the stupidest way you could possibly do it. There's no way you could do it any dumber. So
yeah, I mean that's the I mean, because America is hyper capitalist and doesn't believe in any form of centralized government response to anything. Like, yeah, this is a result. It's like a sort of, it's like a chicken running with his head cut off. Like, we're just sort of winging it, not knowing what the fuck to do, and people.
Yeah, well, winging it's gotten America this far, but I don't know if it's going to continue working. So
yeah,
stay safe. Stay. Try not to be too broke, and try not to get too down. It was a really nice day today, I enjoyed walking around. It was, but yeah, life is very strange.
Very, very strange. Yeah, that concludes this episode. It's a free episode, and if you like this episode, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours, $5 a month. You get bonus content. For those of you who follow us on SoundCloud and Spotify, check us out and support, independent Black media projects. If you like this stuff and you subscribe, it helps us. It helps us keep this shit going. Yeah. Anyway, peace.
See ya.